Hello, how are you? If you're good, great, happy. If not, I'm glad you're here. All right, let's talk politics. So, yesterday morning, a Supreme Court decision came down that we have been waiting on for months, and it was they were taking up the case of whether it was constitutional or not for our president to put in place tariffs just willy-nilly because he felt like it that day. And there's plenty of examples where he himself gets in front of a podium and says very plainly that he didn't like the way somebody was dealing with him, or he didn't like a policy that a completely different country was having for their own country or whatever. And he simply would threaten to put these big tariffs on them for particular items or just in general. It's a weird bargaining chip that he was using to try and get his way. Now, a lot of times they were threats, but one time it was just this big board of like countries and then the tariffs that the new tariff levels that they were going to pay. And the whole time, I mean, this was even before the election, a year before the election, this man was selling these tariffs as if the countries that he was putting tariffs on was actually paying us the money that the tariff rate was. That's just a lie. It's just absolutely the opposite. It's wrong. When he puts a tariff on Germany, things that we import from Germany, the importers pay a percentage more to our government for importing that stuff from Germany. And then the companies, because they have to pay more for that product, most of the time they charge the people that they sell the product to more because their profit margin is lessened with a higher tariff. Now, anybody who took 7th grade civics or 9th grade American history or anything like that, they know that. I mean, you learned it in school, hopefully. Hopefully you were paying attention that day. But literally everyone in the public school system learns this, that tariffs are paid by the importing country. And it's so bizarre that this entire year, tariffs have just been random almost. Like they've just been like, sometimes they blow up to 200% and then, a week later they're back down to 30%, or there's a decision made or a bribe or who knows, I don't know what, and the only thing that does is it makes it very, very, very difficult for American businesses to plan for growth or expansion or hiring or pricing. So it really throws the entire American market into chaos. Now, oddly enough, our American companies have just been making more and more and more profit. That's just the way it's been. I don't understand the stock market anymore. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't follow the actual news that's coming out. Like, you would expect that if news like this came out where all of a sudden now the American government would somehow have to figure out a way to repay all of these billions of dollars that American companies have paid in tariffs, that you would think that all of a sudden the stock market would go up a bunch. But it really hasn't today, at least not at the time of me making this video. It's been just flat. But at the same time today, the fourth quarter 2024 GDP came out and it was really way lower than what was expected. It was only 1.4%. I think it was supposed to be like 2.4% or something like that. So that's bad economic news. And you would think that when that news came out, then the stock market should have gone down a lot because that's indicative of a slowdown in the productivity of the country. Well, that didn't happen either. It was kind of just flat. So I don't understand that part anymore. But what I do understand is that the Supreme Court did what they should have done, and that is to rule that all of these tariffs that our president was putting on were unconstitutional because it states very plainly in the Constitution that Congress is the body that is in charge of taxation on the citizens. And that's what a tariff is. It is a form of tax. A president can't just tax the people more because he feels like it. That's not constitutional. Can't do it. Congress must define the tax codes and define the tax liabilities of its people. I mean, it's written right in the Constitution. He didn't like that part of the Constitution, so he ignored it with all this tariff business. But finally, after an entire year, the Supreme Court said, duh, the Constitution plainly says that you can't do that. So this was a very long-winded, and I'm sorry, this was a very long-winded way to say that the government worked today. It doesn't work most days. I guarantee you that. Investigations investigating investigations. We have people wasting weeks of time sitting in front of these congressional hearings, making statements, not answering questions, grandstanding. And then we have committees that are supposed to be doing jobs and they're just not. And through it all, somehow we're supposed to be making legislation, new laws to help the people. That's not happening either. I mean, we can barely keep the government functioning. We just had like a 37-day shutdown because for whatever reason we couldn't agree on the terms of funding the government for the next 3 months or a year or whatever it is. And now there's another partial shutdown going on right now because they didn't want to fund DHS anymore. So the government usually doesn't work very well. You know, we have 3 very separate but co-equal branches of our government: executive, legislative, and judicial. And they are intended, as per written in the Constitution, to put checks and balances on each other so that one branch doesn't get too powerful and take over. And, you know, that was how our country was designed to work. And I think for about 200 and some years, it worked out pretty well. It's just lately, our executive branch, and I'm not just talking about right now, because this was the same as it's been for, I'm thinking about the last 20 years. We have given our executive branch way more power than was ever intended for them to have. And that's very dangerous because that's generally one person making decisions for the entire branch, 1/3 of our government. And now that it's gotten more and more powerful, it's a little more than 1/3. A president can make executive orders, and there have been more executive orders, more and more and more as we go by, because government moves so slowly anymore. Everything is a weeks-long debate on the congressional floor, and it's very, very hard to pass legislation anymore. We don't pass just one law anymore, basically. We wrap them all up with a bunch of other laws, and we put a package together to try and pass a bunch of laws all at the same time. And that creates even more problems, because then you have people voting on a list of laws. Some they may very much stand for, and a few they might just hate. But because they like these other ones so much, they vote for the package. And that creates more problems down the line, because later their opponents can say, well, in 2015 you voted yes on this thing, and it was like, well, yeah, but it was in a package with like 60 other laws that I really wanted passed. So it was kind of like, you hold your nose and take the medicine because you know the medicine is good for you, but it tastes like garbage. Anyway, so that's the problem. The executive branch has been getting more and more and more power, and just very recently, they've taken so much power that now it has taken a year for the judicial branch to look at that and say, no, that's the line. No more of that. So at least I can feel good that our government is indeed working for this one thing. I guess that's a good start. Also, one of the more difficult things is the way kind of laws are passed in this country. And that is, you know, it has to be brought up on the House floor, and then it has to be discussed, and then it goes to the Senate, and then it has to get discussed, and then it gets voted in the House, and it gets voted in the Senate, and sometimes it gets put back in the House, and then new appropriations are. It's such a mess. They can't just vote on one thing and pass it through and sign it, and then that's it. I think it's going to get even messier after this year. In 2027, I have a good feeling that the leadership in the House is going to flip, and maybe even the leadership in the Senate is going to flip. And what that means is the House and the Senate are going to want to pass important bills, important legislation. But we have a president who's so spiteful that he may just decide to veto literally anything that comes to his desk because it came from a Congress that is not of his party. And that's an unfortunate thing, that we're so black and white lately that if it came from the other party, it must be bad. And we have too large a percentage of this country that believes that. They don't even have to read it. They don't have to even know what it is. If it's brought up by the other party, nope, it's bad. It's got to be bad. That's disappointing that after 250 years, that's where we've become. We have decided that we have drawn a line in the sand. One side is blue, one side is red, one side is Democrat, one side is Republican, one side is liberal lunatics, on the other side is MAGA weirdos. That is not the reality. It's not. But the bottom line is, yesterday, the government worked. It did what it's supposed to do. And I guess that is the bare minimum that I can expect. It worked. Now next week, maybe we'll just go back to chaos and stupidity. And sometimes I think that we're living in the absolute dumbest timeline. Maybe it'll get better. I can only hope. I'll see you tomorrow.